All right. Well, I'm not going to have a chance to do this quick little lesson for D period, so I thought I'd do a quick video, put it online, and that way everyone's equally ready for the reading quiz. But talking about Pyramus and Thisbe and Orpheus and Eurydice. Now, two different lovers, two different levels of devotion, I think is how I'm framing this. Pyramus and Thisbe, and this is all in the reading, they lived on opposite sides of a big wall. Their families were warring, they didn't get along, so they weren't allowed to see each other. They lived next door, though, and in that wall, the two lovers found a little crack that they could talk through. So they'd go meet at the crack in the wall, you know, talk, I guess, talk about how much they loved each other and et cetera, until one day they decide, you know what, let's just run away together and we don't have to talk to this stupid crack in a wall anymore. So they agree to meet at a mulberry tree that has all these nice little white berries in it. Now, this is probably a very inaccurate representation of mulberries, but they decide to meet there. The tomb of Ninus, and there's also a little river. It's a perfect meeting spot. Well, Thisbe gets there first, all right? The girl's on time. But when she gets there, she sees a lion, alas. And the lioness has a mouthful of blood. It's just killed something and eaten, and so it's, no napkins. The lion's just got a mouthful of blood, and Thisbe sees this bloody lion and decides, hey, I'm going to get out of here. So she runs away, and she runs away so fast that she leaves her cloak behind. Now, this is a terrible cloak, but it's like a hood or something. The lion's interested in the cloak, gets blood all over the cloak. And when Pyramus finally shows up, he sees the bloody cloak, thinks that Thisbe's been killed by a lion, and in his desperation, kills himself. Right there at the tree, stabs himself with a dagger. When Thisbe finally comes back, because she still wants to run away and hopes the lion's gone, she sees Pyramus gasping his last breaths, and after he dies, she takes the dagger and kills herself. Right? Very all or nothing here. For better or worse, these types of romance stories are often romanticized, right? They loved each other so much that they couldn't be without each other, and they're willing to die rather than live without. Blood, as the story goes, gets all over the berries, and so if you look at mulberries now, instead of being white, they're all red, to symbolize this tragic love story. In fact, lovers who are willing to die for each other are often preserved as trees or flowers or fruit by the gods as sort of, visual signs to remember them by. All right, but symbolically, excuse me. My argument, and I'm borrowing Plato's argument for Orpheus in a second, but right now Pyramus and Thisbe love each other equally. That's the argument. Orpheus and Eurydice, on the other hand, Plato is convinced that Orpheus loves himself more than he loves Eurydice. So Orpheus was the son of a muse, and he grew up around music, consequently. He falls in love with a wood nymph, Eurydice, and they get married. Orpheus is always kind of more into his own music than he is anyone else. And even after their wedding, Orpheus dips out for a second to get a little musical break. He's got to go play his lyre, he says. So he disappears, and in his absence, Eurydice is chased by a snake, or excuse me, just bit by a snake. Now, some versions say that's an ex-lover or someone who is jealous of Orpheus and had loved Eurydice, and so he kills her. But we'll say the snake bites Eurydice, she dies, and she goes to Hades. Tragic. Orpheus comes back, sees his dead lover, and instead of killing himself like Thisbe and Pyramus, he thinks, I'm just going to walk right down into Hades and get her back myself, right? Which is fairly arrogant. Only the greatest of heroes are able to get there and back. The gods don't necessarily like this assumptive attitude. But he does. He plays his lyre, and he gets past all the various guards and boundaries, sings Cerberus to sleep. He's a good singer. As he's walking down there, the story goes that even Sisyphus stopped rolling his rock up and down a hill to listen, and Tantalus stopped trying to drink water and eat fruit just out of his reach so that he could hear the song. And Hades himself is so impressed by the music that he makes a deal to Orpheus. He says, you know what? If you can make it out of Hades with her following you without looking back once to double check that she's behind you, then I'll let her be free again. So they start walking. Now, I really like the German poet Rilke's version of this, where Eurydice is sort of like a ghostly zombie kind of a character who's, already dead and not necessarily gonna come back to life or has any interest in the living anymore, right? She's sort of committed to this new ghostly existence. So as Orpheus walks up silently, right, no music this time, he's listening to hear her feet behind him. It's a ghost that's following him. There's a cool musical, Hades Town, where they sing to each other, and there's this great, she's very alive, and, I'll follow you, and he's singing, follow me, and they get to the top, and there's some debate as to sort of what this relationship's like as they walk up to the surface. Long story short, Orpheus gets to the top, and right before Eurydice steps into the sunlight that would guarantee her mortality, he turns around, looks at her, and she is condemned to death again. He gets so worked up about it that he doesn't play the same kind of songs. He starts a cult, they say, and causes enough commotion and draws enough negative attention to himself that the Maenads, who we've heard about, angrily tear him to pieces. Legend has it, though, that his head continued to sing music even after it had been ripped off of his body. It's an interesting story, right? And I mentioned that Plato was convinced that the gods never intended to let Orpheus out of Hades with Eurydice. That instead, this sort of fake bargain was given to him to punish him even further for presuming to walk into Hades all by himself without killing himself to get there, without dying to get there. He's trying to cheat death. And so this twisted game is created to sort of punish him. Other stories suggest that he just got ahead of himself, was so excited to have his wife back at the top that he turned around too fast and she slipped back into the underworld. And I think the traditional telling, or sort of a painfully obvious telling, might just be that he got cold feet. He's thinking all the way up that hill if he really wants to be married to Eurydice or not, if he really loves her as much as he loves himself or his music, and he gets cold feet and turns around and sort of makes this decision to send her to Hades instead of bringing her back after all of this. That's for you to decide what you think. What do you imagine the moral of this story is? And my question for the free writes and the essay, poem writing is, what are you willing to sacrifice for love? Is this a noble sacrifice? Or is this a moral allegory reminding you to listen to your parents, don't get and fall in love too quick or run away, it could kill you? Is Orpheus guilty of the hubris that Plato convicts him of? Or is there some other reason that he wasn't able to successfully get Eurydice out of Hades? Anyways, that's the 10-minute version. The readings in Edith Hamilton's mythology, and, I hope this helps.